Behold, Orb-splosion Trinity, one of the finalists in my September 2019 Framework Battle Royale build competition. This loadout uses Trinity's Well of Life in a combo with the Sobek's Acid Shells and the Abating Link augment for Link to do enormous burst damage to groups while showering allies in health and energy orbs with Death Cube and Trinity's Pool of Life augment. Since this loadout was not created by me, I've left some disclaimers in the description, and if you don't know what I'm on about, check out the playlist down there. These specific stats are not going to work for everyone. I know I don't like the range being this low, but this combo does ask you to be close to enemies, so that is perfectly reasonable. Again, it's much more about what stands out about this build, but the specific values you might want to play around with. Flow is better than usual here. Flow can help your rotations, that is your cycle of abilities you'll be casting often, by allowing you to store more energy from Energy Vampire. Normally Flow doesn't give you more energy in any way, it just lets you hold more that could just as well remain on the ground as energy orbs until you need it. But here, that energy is gone unless you can hold it immediately, so Flow is excellent, it's effectively just efficiency. Somewhat high strength helps Abating Link remove most but not all armor. That's relevant here because Sobek's Acid Shells does corrosive damage. If the enemies still have a tiny bit of armor, as close to 1% of their armor left as possible, they will take more damage than if they had none because they still have that armor type. Finally, Equilibrium and Health Conversion are both really reliably excellent in this loadout. If you reform us so as to be able to fill the last slot, consider running Power Drift to push Abating Link even closer to full armor reduction without fully removing armor. With this loadout, it's at 89%, and with Power Drift on top, it will be 96%, which is just about perfect. Now, the combo in this loadout, that Well of Life increases enemy health so that Acid Shells will do the big damage to enemies that will die from it, with their armor reduced by Abating Link, that doesn't take a whole lot of specific mods. This low range may not be to your taste, as I was mentioning before, but it does allow for this combo to work just fine, as the Sobek won't do any damage and be able to kill things unless you're close to enemies anyway. First, let's tackle the Orb part of the loadout. Death Cube is also spewing orbs with Synth Deconstruct and Energy Generator. Yes, we'll come back to Vaporize, and we'll want to use either Sweeper Prime or the Cryatra to tag multiple enemies at once for assists as effectively as possible. Most finalists' loadouts have shown the Cryatra, and a lot of them wanted it over the Sweeper because the Sweeper doesn't as reliably proc status incidentally as part of tagging enemies, but Sweeper can be better in certain situations, so let's show a Sweeper build. This is my personal build for tagging enemies for assists only. Again, does okay damage, this weapon can do okay damage, but this is for tagging enemies for assists. If you look for a Riven, you're going to want to be looking for multi-shot and fire rate, mostly, but things like crit can be sort of interesting depending on arcanes you want to trigger. This is just critical damage. Mostly, you're here for punch through and the spread increase from vicious spread to hopefully hit more enemies with each shot. When you can, it's nice to include the Vigilante set, since it affects your primary weapon and gives you better crits. These mods mostly fit in naturally in most Sentinel weapon builds, and I don't go as far as to use Vigilante supplies since it does nothing for the Sentinel, and this weapon's performance is important here. So, right, Vaporize was buffed quite heavily between the time that this loadout was created and this video. This is my own Death Cube build you're seeing, and keeping in mind that Death Cube Prime is coming and is tankier than Death Cube, I'm considering swapping out Repair Kit for Vaporize. Vaporize has always been a single target stun with nominal damage later in the game, but it had a very long cooldown and now it happens much more often, does damage that scales with your Sentinel's weapon mods, hits from further away, and even has punch through, making it a glorious addition to Death Cube's already respectable niche as an energy generator. Yes, and finally we have the Sobek. You can build this a few different ways. Again, we're here for Acid Shells and the Sobek is not very good, so our goal is to make the Sobek usable to take advantage of Acid Shells. It is Acid Shells that uses the Sobek, not the other way around. So a few different builds. Here's the Creator's build for raw damage output. I like Viral and Heat as just good generalist elements. It will be good against the enemies that we've reduced the armor on in those cases. And you should also consider a build for hitting 100% status chance on that distributed pellet status chance for increased overall damage and status effects. You do need Nano Applicator to get there, but you will have this active. You're playing Trinity, you're going to be casting plenty. You will have this active. You just have to remember to aim. If you use this build, definitely build something other than corrosive. This loadout doesn't particularly need or want corrosive. Again, we're here for Acid Shells, and there are other mods that do this. This is not the only mod that does damage based on percent max health. But Acid Shells has one of the best percentages of damage based on max health, one of the best ranges, and the damage is radial, so enemies at the edge will take a lot less. It is important for the range to be big. These don't do a lot of damage outside of point blank range. And it also has pretty much the best damage type. Corrosive is obviously what's going to get there. Any of these will kill everything if the enemies don't have armor, so you might as well use one that's better if they do. So I'm going to take off Vacuum so that you can clearly see how many orbs we're getting. So first of all, in its simplest form, this is the combo that you're going to be using. So we're going to Well of Life an enemy in a group. Then we're going to get close and use a baiting link, make sure that's attached. We're going to kill it with the Sobek. And then enemies nearby are going to take a lot of damage and pretty much just die, while enemies further away are going to take a lot less damage. Certainly within 15 meters, but practically no damage, right? And then that first kill is not great, but after that you can just ping-pong through the crowd. So we'll kill this one next. You see it kills a few of those. Now these enemies are weaker, so we can start popping through them. Make sure we have a baiting link active. Pop, pop, pop. And then it gets much better. So again, even though the Sobek is pretty bad up front, this loadout does allow you to really ping-pong through the group of enemies and make sure that you have enough damage to keep going. As you'll have noticed, though, the damage is not extremely high up front just because these enemies do still have a fair amount of armor, a fair amount of their damage reduction. You're still pretty much one-shotting anything super nearby, but there are some enemies, like in situations like this, where you don't do all that much damage with acid shells to them, and if your baiting link isn't attached, it's pretty difficult to kill them. Again, those were level 50 enemies, so we'll go back up to the 80 that we've been using as a standard, and you'll see that, again, the damage is not extremely high just because the enemies do still have significant armor, and reducing it even further would help proportionally. But as you can see at this level, the Sobek with this level of armor reduction from a baiting link can barely even kill these enemies. But when you do, it kills other enemies based on the max health just the same. So you can see again, the payoff is high. You can kill pretty much any enemies of any level. You just have to get the kill on that first one, which gets harder very quickly. It's been a bit difficult to see how many orbs we're getting, so let's do this. There's an enemy. Let's get some orbs out of you. Okay. That is literally several orbs. So that's like killing a group where one of them is well and pool of lifed, and Death Cube gets to tag most of them for assists. To note one more time, you can still use Energy Vampire and Blessing very effectively. I personally included Vazarin Focus for the additional affinity range, and therefore effective range of Blessing. Even with negative range, this loadout has a high range heal. That was Orb-splosion Trinity. Thanks to the creator for submitting this and for allowing me to make a video about it.